Okay, we are here. We are live for our first session of Research to Reps Roundtable. I'm your co-host, Pat Ivy from Behind Sets and Reps, and I'm going to introduce myself just a little bit. Currently, I'll go backwards, and for over 20 years, I was a college strength and conditioning coach, former professional NFL athlete, college athlete as well, and I am now an administrator, Associate Athletics Director for Student Athlete Health and Performance at the University of Louisville, and overseeing sports medicine, sports nutrition, sports performance, sports science, mental health, mental performance for all of the athletes. And we are starting something here, and I have a few guests. They're going to introduce themselves. So up first, I'm going to pass it to Coach Javar Gillette.
Hey, Pat, thanks for joining in on this team-based approach, right? So my name is Javar. I'm the Director of Athletic Performance for the Houston Rockets. This is my sixth season currently with the Rockets. And prior to that, I was with the Detroit Tigers for 14 years, served in the minor leagues for 4, and then 10 years as the Director of Strength and Conditioning there. I think it's a pleasure to be on with such a tremendous group of people. The vision is to really bridge the gap between the research, the science, and the application, and dive a little bit into the mindset as well. It's a balanced approach, right? So we can take mind and body and improve performance on a daily basis, right? So it's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. Next up, Coach, I'm just calling it Coach anyway, Coach Ted Lambrinides.
Hey, you guys hear him?
No, sir.
Ted, you might be muted.
Nope. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
There we go.
All right.
Daniel, why don't you mute yourself for right now?
Yep.
Mute yourself for right now.
So
He's a trouble guy.
No, I'm Ted Lambrinides. For the last 6 years, I've been serving as the sports science consultant with the NFL and the PFAS, Professional Football Athletic Trainers Society. So each month I provide teams with research updates, provide consulting for teams that have questions on a lot of the game day tracking that may occur with the NFL, and as well with their practice tracking systems, and also do a lot of work with major colleges as well.
Thank you, Ted. Next up is our guest, Christopher Simmons.
Hello, everybody. My name is Christopher Simmons, University of Memphis, head athletic trainer. On a day-to-day basis, I work with men's basketball. I moved back to my alma mater last summer after 10 years at the University of Kentucky men's basketball. And before that, overall, I've been with Coach Cal for 13 years, and I'm happy to be here with you guys to talk about basketball and healthcare and performance and tying that all together without the silos in the building.
All right. Coach Shapiro, Coach Daniel Shapiro, intro.
Yes, thanks for having me, guys. My name is, like you said, Daniel Shapiro. I'm currently the head strength and conditioning coach for the LA Clippers. Also currently the president of the NBSCA, which is the National Basketball Strength and Conditioning Association. It's our organization of all the strength and conditioning professionals in the NBA. Going backwards, I just kind of work backwards. This is my 3rd season here. Before that, I was 4 years as director of athletic performance for men's basketball at the University of Washington. Before that, I was 8 years the head strength coach for the Sacramento Kings. 2 years the head strength coach for men's and women's basketball, University of Dayton. Then 7 years before that for the assistant strength and conditioning coach for the once upon a time Seattle Supersonics. So here I am, and happy to be here.
Absolutely. So thank you all for being here with us. What we're going to do is try to provide a resource for anyone that is providing care for athletes. So if you're an athletic trainer, if you're a nutritionist, if you're a strength and conditioning coach, sports scientist, mental health, mental performance person, and we're going to take the research and talk about the research and how it applies to, and in terms of practical application to real life situations. And right now we know we're in the, hopefully somewhere in the middle of the coronavirus epidemic or pandemic. And we know that our athletes are wherever they are at home. We're hoping that they're training and following good exercise prescription. Well, these athletes are eventually going to have to return to our facilities. And what does the research say? What can we get from the research that can help us to drive decisions that we can? So when we're in conversations together with our administrators and with our head coaches, we can understand what best practices are, and hopefully we can engage with each other and having great conversation and sharing information, which is typically not done in strength and conditioning in some levels, but more so in other I guess, industries. So with that being said, I like to start it off and just talk about what do we think we're going to be faced with when our athletes return to campus? What are the major concerns? What does the research say that can help us make some informed decisions?
Well, I think, Pat, what's going to be interesting is with this pandemic, this will be, I think, the first time in college professional athletics that we've been faced with this. I know NBA, NFL have had lockouts. College athletics has not had a situation like this arise before. So I think the real crucial thing is, and I think what's great about today's roundtable is the critical factors are the collaboration between an administrator, a coach, an athletic trainer. So I think the teams that have great collaboration, everybody's on the same page. It's a player-centric approach. I think they're the ones that are going to have the best return to play. Because I think in terms of when kids come back, they'll be all over the place in terms of fitness levels. I think it's a guess at best to figure that out. But I think if people use the CSCC, NSCA position paper on guidelines for return to play, and there was a lot of input from the NCAA and the NATA with that document. It gives you enough notice now to take those guidelines, implement what your training template looks like within the guidelines of that document.
Yeah, I agree with that. So knowing that that information is out there, how do we help the professionals in our industry?
Yeah, and to piggyback off of what Ted is saying is, you know, it's just like sport, right? Any sport you play, you have, you know, time dispersed throughout a game. What team has the best ability to make adjustments as the game goes on, right? So I think coming back to sport now, the teams that are able to adjust, the individuals that are able to adjust best are gonna end up making the best transition back to sport. In our case, in basketball, you know, we might have to compete in the playoffs. So in that case, you know, the team that is able to make the biggest adjustment, the player that is able to make the biggest adjustments, the best adjustments really, and that's where we come in, is using science and research to help guide them in the right direction. And that's going to allow them to succeed. So those that are able to make those adjustments properly are going to have an edge on those that don't, right? And so us as professionals, if we can guide them in the right direction using research, you know, how detrained are these guys going to be? How can we progress them properly once they do return to play? How can we progress them properly, you know, where they don't have a setback and get hurt, but at the same time, we're getting them in tip-top shape, ready to compete at the highest level.
Yeah. Well, Chris, from an athletic trainer standpoint, what are you thinking? What are your concerns?
My concerns is just to when they come back, we're gonna look at it as I'm gonna be in the off season. I'm in the off season right now, so it's gonna be a new year when they come back, and they all gonna be deconditioned. So we start back at day one, physicals, sickle cell testing, all that starts over for us, and that's whereas you guys in the NBA, you guys got to ramp up real quick and get back into the games, get back on TV, get it ready for the playoffs. Mine is gonna be kind of slower based because my guys are at home right now, and the presidents of the universities are trying to figure out when they're gonna let them back on campus. But I'm basing everything back down to starting over the off season with the strength coach and the physical therapist, and starting over our annual plan and starting at zero when they come back, and looking at all factors, looking at the physical, doing baseline testing, and then slowly moving back into normal day life.
And you said slowly. That's not what I'm hearing. I know I'm hearing a 6-week time span, maybe. I'm hearing that number, but I also heard something about with the sport of football of going back to 2-a-days.
Yes.
So we're going to have sport coaches that have they more faster, some more. Let's do more. Let's do a lot, whatever it is up front, and get the soreness out of the way. I remember hearing coaches say that. Let's get the soreness out of the way. All right. And we're going to have the sports scientists that are going to want to look at different measures. We have the sports medicine who are going to be looking at it from the health standpoint. We have the strength and conditioning coaches who are going to be looking at it from the performance, like who's out of shape, who's been doing what they're supposed to be doing, and we're going to have athletes all over the board. Some did more than they were supposed to. Like they may be close to being overtrained when they return. You have some that are going to be severely undertrained when they return. How are we going to help them? What does the research say that we can help? How can we help?
I think when you look at the position paper there, Pat, where a lot of the 6 weeks return to before the week one of college football is to start. I think a lot of the tentative proposals are the first 2 weeks are just literally the strength coach and the players. And then they'll progress in doing position drills with the coaches. And at that point, that's where you have to make sure that those position coaches understand there has to be a progression in terms of the work they're doing on the field. And then you'll have a couple of weeks with those coaches, and then you'll have organized team activities. I think with regard to the 2-a-days, I think that would be one padded practice, and the recommendations I'm hearing, another essentially an NFL type walkthrough without helmets. Because once you put a helmet on, even if you have no pads on, they're going to be banging heads. And I think there's some research to, I think they used the research to get rid of 2-a-days from those studies, that if you were an unpadded practice with a helmet, there was still a lot of contact. So if they're going to allow 2 practices a day, you'll have to have one padded, one without helmets. And still, I think it's the managing of the workloads. Like you said, Pat, to your point, you have a guy that he's probably close to game shape, that they were on point, doing exactly what he was supposed to do. And then you get the kid who hasn't done anything. And that's why they came up with these recommendations in these position papers, is for the outlier that comes back out of shape, might have sickle cell. And those are the kids that when they come back, I went them doing a lot of their conditioning under the supervision of the athletic trainer. Because if you put them in with the team setting, strength coaches, and a lot of times it's the actual, position coaches of the sport, they forget the kid has underlying issues. And you'll hear, come on, fat ass, you just, what have you been doing? And a lot of the kids that push themselves too hard to get, exertional exercise overload, they're pleasers. They try to please the coach and sometimes push themselves too much. And so I think to protect the kid from the coach, you sequester them, so to speak, with, have the athletic trainer supervise them maybe on the other end of the field from the rest of the team. What's your comments on that, Chris?
You're right on it from a healthcare standpoint, and especially with your kids that's a sickle cell trait kid, and you got to really concentrate on those, and especially the deconditioned kids, so you can bring them back in a progression that's in accordance with the NCAA bylaws of acclimatizing them back to sport. And so that's right on with the research right there.
And we've been talking about even making adjustments to our return to play testing and assessment in this new situation we're in, if we do come back to play. So do you think that there might be some good adjustments we can make to ensure a guy is conditioned properly? You know, is there anything new or something that we might want to add that's quick, easy, that we can do to measure a guy's level of conditioning without that? And you also have to take into account, I want to be able to educate my athlete on what's going to come next, right? So if I'm going to do a 300-yard shuttle, and I don't typically do that with my athletes, I'm going to want to make sure that they know that it's coming in the protocol. So is there any other protocols maybe that we could implement just as an adjustment to this situation?
I think that what the position paper recommends on that is if you have a pre-existing assessment number on an athlete, that the testing values would be, you would make modifications in the volume and intensity of that particular same test. And if you have an athlete that's coming back, it could be in the order of, 30 to 20% reduction in what they did from a previous assessment. So
our expectations might have to be modified a little bit depending on, our own situations, whether it's, some teams aren't in season now, but I mean, even looking at, baseball for as another example, what, these guys are trying to stay ready right now. A pitcher has to be ready to throw, and there's fear of getting hurt. So when, how do you adjust? How do you know that you're not throwing too much, or you're because there is no end in sight or starting point in sight, right? No deadline. It's hard to structure the program. So the volume, I guess, should be adjusted, huh?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think, usually, and you should be, if let's just say that you've got normal game practice loads, and then you're going to work back, say, 3 or 4 weeks, I would, take, around 10, 15% each week and try to lead up to get back to where we wanted.
Okay.
So,
and let's say we were to implement a conditioning test, and our standards are a certain level. What is the percentage that we should maybe reduce those expectations so that we're fair to the athlete, but at the same time we can make a meaningful decision on their level of condition?
I think that the position paper says about a 20% reduction in some of those variables. And I think the other thing that would help is if you had any heart rate data that look at heart rate response, heart rate recovery from, a previous test, that could be used also as another measure to say, boy, this guy's, he's back to where he was, before we split. So this guy stayed in phenomenal shape.
Yeah, Ted, when I was with the San Diego Chargers, the test when you returned to camp, it was a treadmill test. I believe maybe on the interval treadmill test, and the heart rate, they had the heart rates hooked up to us, and you could really push yourself really hard to pass that the conditioning test itself, the interval test on the treadmill, but the heart rate data is what really gave the sports performance coaches an idea of where you were. Because did you struggle? How hard? What was your rate of exertion? The same test, like, could you do it and your heart rate kept a low heart rate, or was it something where you were almost at max heart rate? So that's just something that came back.
Yeah.
But they also had the what the numbers were before you left. So after minicamp or after minicamp, before training camp, they knew what those numbers were, so that when you return 6 or 7 weeks later, they knew, what your recovery was, what your recoverability was.
Yeah. And I know there's some new, the U.S. military's has created some new algorithms that look at sequential heart rate data to estimate core body temperature. So if you do have athletes that, could be at risk and you're not sure, I think the use of these algorithms gives the coaches as well as the healthcare practitioners additional information to look at to see, hey, is this guy's, what's their estimated core body temperature? Because you have a lot of kids now that are on ADD medicine. And those particular, classification of medicines, if you look at the, chemical structure, they're very similar to amphetamines. So when you exercise, you want to dissipate heat. You want to have vasodilation. Those types of substances cause peripheral vasoconstriction. So you tend to hold more heat in. And the other thing that they do is they override the central governor system in your brain. So when you take people into the lab and you purposely try to get their body temperatures up as high as you can by just, crushing them on a treadmill, people get 103, 103.5, and that's it. You'll see some kids that are on these medicines and they're like 105, 107. So I would always make sure that as we get back, to training in the hot environments, I always keep an eye on those kids that are on the ADD medicine. Because just think about, why people take, different pre-workout supplements, to get a little bit of a kick. And now you're taking this stuff and that really gives you a kick. So, it may allow you to work a little bit harder, but you have to be real careful that these kids don't overexert themselves.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting because I don't know how much that information is shared with everyone that has that's working with the athlete. Is that considered a mental health issue, and the mental health people are protecting the athlete, maybe, and not sharing that information. If you don't have a comprehensive integrated team approach, the strength and conditioning coach, the sports nutritionist, hopefully the sports medicine people are aware, but maybe the position coaches and sport coaches are not aware.
Exactly. So, if you look at a lot of the deaths that have happened at the collegiate and high school levels over the last 10 years, the incidence of the kids that drop dead that are on those, it's a very, very high correlation. Now, I understand that those medicines have a legitimate medical purpose for mental health reasons and learning reasons, but they also, the practitioners in strength and conditioning have to be aware of the potential side effects with regard to exercise for those athletes.
And that's a good point where we were talking about earlier about the silos, everybody having an integrated approach to this whole deal, because what you're saying is very important. ADHD is a factor in sport right now. It's something that I'm very close to my heart because I want to see my guys play at a high level. Whatever they need to do that, I try to help them on a day-to-day basis. But at the same time, with the privacy laws and everything, you have to educate the student athlete or the professional athlete that I need you to trust me that I'm not going to release this to the wrong person, but I need my whole team to know what's going on with you on a day-to-day basis. That's where the lines of communication got to be open, and there's got to be trust, and it starts on a day-to-day basis. But I really like what you're saying there, because that's huge on the ADHD medicine. But at the same time, your hydration protocol got to be up to par, because with that medicine, you do get dehydrated. So you really have to pump the fluids with your student athlete, all your student athletes, but especially your student athlete or your professional athletes that are with that mental health issue. You have to really focus in on them, lock in with them. They're in a separate program with me on a day-to-day basis, making sure that they're at their best. But that's because I go over the call of duty on a day-to-day basis with my athletes. I don't have 100 athletes. Even if I did, that's just an extra step I got to take to make sure that those mental health kids are taken care of, because that's important.
Yeah, I think the first step is the education. Second thing is making sure that everyone does their due diligence, and that, these athletes, if they are, on a medication that's prescribed by a doctor, that it's for the right reasons. That's the second reason, right? And then from there, how do we get better at, and again, that goes back to education. So if we can perhaps provide, some sort of initiative program to those that are approved and prescribed by a medical doctor to take any sort of medication, that they are educated on everything that goes with it, right? And so that they know, because a lot of these kids just aren't educated. They don't know that there are side effects to certain things, and there's side effects to everything. It's homeostasis, right? There's an equal and opposite reaction to everything. So what is our goal? Our goal in life is to maintain homeostasis. So not being a medical doctor, with ADHD, if you have ADHD, then, certain things that happen in your brain that don't allow you to focus, do whatever. And so how do you get to homeostasis, and that's for a doctor to figure out. But in any case, me, just on personal opinion, I would want to be educated fully on anything that I would put in my body, regardless, right? And it's the same as strength and conditioning. I want to be educated on every exercise that I do. Everything's got to have a purpose behind it. So I think the education process behind all this is the major key to success.
And Coach, can you talk about your bike and treadmill protocol that you use with your cognitive awareness program at the Houston Rockets? I still use it to this day at wherever I'm at, but I wanted the people to hear it and understand it.
Which one is it? Remind me of.
He's got too many.
We're not going to say the person's name, but it's a treadmill warm up that you do with them just to get them going cognitively in the morning when they walk in the building.
Treadmill. Okay.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know me, I'm always thinking outside the box. So I had this custom treadmill made. It's about 9 feet wide, 12 feet in length. And then my thing is you got to blend the mind and body, right? So for true transfer to occur on the court, on the field, it's got to have some cognitive processing. You got to involve executive function. So instead of just jogging on the treadmill, these guys are moving in multiple directions, and then I'll put fit lights or some sort of reactive component to it. So in this case, we might use some fit lights. So they're moving on the treadmill, but then because it is a wider treadmill, now we can, the light will go off and they can accelerate towards the light, have it come off, and then they change direction and come back. I'll incorporate a basketball. So they're actually dribbling a basketball on really a treadmill just is a forever moving floor, right? That's all it is. So we're involving executive function, cognitive processing, and really just waking the brain up so these guys are more alert. That's got to be part of the warm up, right? Is we got to wake the brain up and body at the same time. So how can we create a random environment that they're going to encounter in the field, in competition? How can we recreate that in practice and in preparation? So that was my goal with that. So my goal in the warm-ups is we're going to wake the brain up first, and then the body will come with it.
Yeah. Coach, will you be able to use that with your sort of return activity? Will you be able to measure it? Like, or is that just something that is it just you just consider it a warm up?
Yeah, no, I mean, you can measure. I think the key to measurement is that you're able to have the environment needs to be the same each time, right? So you're putting them in a setting that you know is fixed, and you can repeat that. It's difficult in our applied setting because you're traveling across the country. There's a lot of different things in-house in our weight room. We can replicate that protocol fairly easily. So we can get good data just on reaction time. I mean, even if it's as simple as measuring time, you're getting some sort of data, right? But you can measure errors. There's a lot of different things you can do. But I think in a conditioning setting, one test you could do is for a longer period of time, something that takes a little bit of endurance, stamina, measure reaction time and see how that decreases over time. And that would be a good way, to measure their overall stamina and put a number to it, right? So especially if you're limited in space and everything and you wanted to test people from Zoom, how can you do that? You can give them certain drills where they have to complete it over a certain amount of time, and you could see how long or how many repetitions, things like that. Another tool we use is a quick board. Great conditioning test when you don't have a lot of space. You've heard of the running anaerobic sprint test, where it's basically a 10 sprints with a very short rest time in between, and then you're taking the speed of those each rep, and you're looking at the percent decrease. Well, that's difficult. So can you do that in a confined space? In our case, if we want to quantify it more consistently, we're using a quick board. But if you have an athlete count the amount of reps that they do over 10 seconds, and let's just say they get 30 reps in 10 seconds of a foot fire drill, and then they rest 10 seconds, and then they repeat that 10 times, how many reps did they get at the end? How much fatigue? And now you can measure you can calculate the percent decrease that occurred and see what their overall conditioning level is at their home. So there's little adjustments that you can make that can give you a little bit more feedback on where an at his current state.
Yeah.
Another thing is, you're trying to measure, how much fatigue, like the current state of an athlete, is an athlete fatigued? Well, usually the fatigue is occurring from a mental standpoint. So their lack of focus, or they're mentally fatigued. If you can incorporate these cognitive tools, there's an app called Soma, SOMA, Soma NPT, that the athletes can download, and that can measure some cognitive processing skills, simple reaction, Stroop test, all the way to more choice reaction type exercises that you can implement. And really, I use that to not only activate and improve their level of focus and attention, but also it could be a good measurement of how fatigued a person is going into a training session.
I'm just listening to you and thinking about my experience and conversations I've had with other athletic performance, strength and conditioning professionals. And there is a void and absence of sports science. Like, I don't know how you move forward, and we're talking about integration and doing it safely and understanding what the research says, and then having coach, administrator, and others in the room that are ready to get the season going. I don't know how we make safe, informed decisions without understanding what sports science is.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, Pat. I think you're going to your position there at Louisville will be probably at the center of getting things back for your fall sports in a safe fashion as a result of your communication skills and your skill set from your previous experiences. You can communicate with the other administrators. You can communicate with the head coaches and as well as the strength coaches and the nutritionists to make sure everybody's moving in the same direction. And I think, leadership will be crucial because without that, you're not going to have the proper communication and collaboration. Getting people to understand something. And I think your point's well taken that it's hard to get people to understand that are actually in a superior position than the person that's trying to message that. Because when we get back, the first 3 weeks might go smoothly with the strength conditioning staff, the nutritionists, the athletic trainers. And now we bring the actual sports coaches in and they're going, hey, we're way behind. So they're going to try to do installs where at a rate that they probably shouldn't. So this is what you had planned to do your installs in week 1. You might want to take that and cut it back by 30, 40%. Because the one variable that is going to be neglected is the effects of mental fatigue and mental stress on these athletes coming back. Because not only are they coming back, they're coming back for school. They are coming back and they're going to get hit with so much stuff at one time that the ability to manage the additional mental stress and demands, to me, that's going to be just as hard as the physical demands.
Yeah. So if we look at some of these research articles that we will send out and attach to this Zoom call, I'm looking at one, exertional heat illness in American football players, when is risk the greatest? There's another one I'm looking at, 12 cases of exertional rhabdomyolysis in college football players from the same institution. So I'm looking at some of these articles. How do we use what's here to help us help others? How do we use this?
I think just as Javar had mentioned, is the key is to communicate these to the athletes several weeks prior to them returning. So if we're 2-3 weeks out, we sort of know that, hey, you may be back in the middle of July. And nobody knows for sure, but let's just use that as an example that, the messaging to the players has to be, made in a simplified form. Just take 3 bullet points out of those particular articles that you mentioned there, Pat. And then sometimes that player might look in the mirror and say, oh, geez, that's me. And I think they're aware, and I think Javar's point's well taken, is I think the key is to educate the players in a fashion that's not threatening or, scaring them to the point, but it's making them aware of who might be at risk and how to mitigate the instances for some of those people that are at risk.
Yeah, I mean, a football athlete is so used to getting into shape running across a football field. In this case, they're at homes. How do they get in shape? And so for us, it's an educational process of, if you give me a 5x5 area, I will get you in better shape where your muscles are able to exert themselves and handle the stressors that, we're going to get your heart rate up and we're going to, reduce the recovery times. We're going to do a high intensity interval training session in the comfort of your own home. And we're going to push you so that you get to and this is just the goal, the focus and the goal is to maintain or improve yourself to a moderate and acceptable level of conditioning so that when you do return, you're able to take it on. But if you are completely detrained, I mean, for us, we're 26, 28 days in, maybe a little bit more, as you mentioned, Ted, like 2 weeks and you're detrained, and that's like for a sedentary person. So these guys aren't sedentary, but they're not being put in the environment that they're typically in. So they're detrained. So how do we maintain a moderate level of conditioning that is not replicable on the football field, to the football field? It's not replicable to basketball. in soccer and all these other sports. But how do we maintain a physiological, a cardiorespiratory, and muscular endurance, conditioning level that's acceptable when they return? It's no different than the off season. In all of our cases right now, the only difference is we have to make an adjustment and be really good at educating and delivering programs that our athletes can do with little to no equipment. And how do we do that? And there's ways to do that. You have to be creative. You have to think outside the box. I know from a strength perspective, that's the biggest component. We know that eccentric strength works. We know that isometric strengthening tools work under load, heavy loads, right? How do you, how do you replicate that? I threw an Instagram post out there that, I have a truck that I was doing an isometric pull, mid-thigh pull, heavily researched exercise, mid-thigh isometric pull using my truck. Is that crazy? Like, whatever you want to think is crazy. Like, I'm just being creative to provide, because I know if I'm an athlete, I need to take on these loads and train under resistance. Well, how am I going to do that if I don't have the equipment? Well, isometric training can work. So can you push against a wall? I mean, can you find ways to exert maximal force without equipment? So just use a wall. It would be a great start, right? And just max and change angles a little bit, but max effort against the wall, try to push. And if you're a lineman, and you don't have weight, a wall can do a lot of good, at least to maintain a certain level of conditioning, so that when you get back under the bench press or the squat rack, that you don't break.
Now,
Ted.
Pat, go ahead. I was just going to ask you, what are you communicating now to your strength coaches, Pat?
Right. Well, we operate as a team. So with 23 sports that we have here, we have 23 health and performance teams, and it's one director health and performance teams, which makes us have 24. And on each sport team's health and performance team is a sports medicine person. The physician is always there. The sports psychologist, so the mental health person, the nutritionist, the strength coach. All of these people I'm constantly encouraging them to communicate at the highest level. So we instituted what we call the 3 C's, which are our core values. So care, like, do you provide the best care? How can we provide the best care? Care for the athlete, care for one another, care for what we're doing. And then communication. How do we communicate verbally, written, body language with people up, lateral, down, no matter where they are in the organization? And then collaborate. How do we collaborate with the people in our departments, the people in other departments? How do we collaborate with the athletes? So it's not just a situation where we're just dictating to the athletes. We need to be at a point where we've educated athletes, where we can actually collaborate with them on their training plan, and same with coaches. We shouldn't be in a position where coaches are dictating what conditioning drills are being done and how long we're doing conditioning, or what modalities are being used in the training room. That should not be happening. We should be collaborating so that, coach, if I need 30 minutes, I will use my experience and expertise to be as efficient as I can with those 30 minutes, not being dictated what to do with those 30 minutes. So it's about communication and collaboration at the highest level. So how can we create win-wins for the athletes, coaches, everyone involved, without compromising the health of the and safety of the student athletes? It's not easy, because some people can get really defensive about their areas, because they take great pride in their areas. So how do we get past that and understand that there's a lot of gray area, there's a lot of intersections with the athlete? The athlete, you don't get to split the athlete and say, this part is the nutrition part of the athlete, this part is the sports psych part of the athlete, this part is the performance and training. No, it's one athlete, and we all have to share our care and how we provide that care with one another. So without depleting the tank. And, we have to understand, like Javar brought up homeostasis. We have to understand where that is. We have to understand if we're taking too much out, are they replenishing what we're taking? And that takes a lot of collaboration.
What do you do, Pat, regarding like the motivation? Since this is a new situation for our athletes to deal with, they've never really had to. This is brand new, so I feel like the first couple of weeks everyone was motivated, but now you might be hitting this lull period where you're not so motivated, or you're losing focus. Again, because you don't really have a date in mind where you have to return. So it's hard. It's very difficult to plan. So without purpose, you kind of get lost sometimes. So what are you doing to keep the guys focused? What are your goals right now, I guess, to give more purpose?
Mental performance is like physical performance. So if you didn't prepare and you don't prepare, like it's hard to deliver your best physical performance. So if your athletes didn't know how to train before this quarantine period, and they can't go in the gyms, and so when you say, hey, come up with a different press exercise, I need you to come up with a different upper body pulling exercise. I need you to come up with a different rotational core exercise. I need you to come up with a posterior chain dominant exercise. Like if you've invested in your athletes and educated them, now you can have those conversations with them and say, hey, we're going to do total body. I want you to do total body 3 times a week. I want you to do upper pull, upper press. You can core, lower hip hinge, some sort of posterior chain dominant exercise on those 3 days. Here, exercise. If you can have those conversations with your athletes, you'll feel pretty confident. They'll feel pretty confident. They'll be competent. You'll know they know what they're doing. Hey, here's the work to rest ratio I want you to work on. I want you to think of 4-to-1. If you do a sprint for 15 seconds, what should be your rest time? They'll say, around 60 seconds. Yeah. So no matter what you do, I want you to stay with that 3-to-1, 4-to-1 rest to work ratio. If you've invested, same thing with nutrition. I want you to have a good source of carb on your plate. I want you to lean protein. Make sure you got a fruit and vegetable on your plate. If you've invested in them, and now during the quarantine time, they're at home, and you can continue that education, it's a lot easier for them to be motivated to want to train when they know what to do, what they're doing, and why they're doing it. It's a lot easier for them to eat, to choose good foods to eat if they know what to eat, why they're eating it, what the benefits are, how's that going to help them to maintain their gains. And if you put all of that work in on the physical side, it's there. What about the mental side? How much did we put in before quarantine? Did we teach them skills of focus? Did we teach them what concentration is? It's the opposite of distraction, and how to, did we teach them what time orientation is, like how to be right here, right now in the present? Did we teach them that most of our self-talk is negative, and how that you can only think one thought at a time, so that if you have a negative thought, at least a negative performance, and all you got to do is replace the negative thought with a positive thought. If you've invested time into them before the quarantine period, they can call on that knowledge and be able to apply it, so that now, okay, motivation. If you've invested in helping your athletes to be intrinsically and internally motivated, as opposed to they only do what you tell them to do because they're scared to get in trouble, or they're scared to get their checks reduced, whatever it is. If you've invested in external and extrinsic motivation before quarantine, you're going to come up short. But if you've invested in internal and intrinsic motivation before quarantine, and your athletes have that drive within, they just become more driven when they're faced with adversity. as opposed to, Coach, I need you to push me. Coach, I need you to get me right. Coach, can you help me to, like, no, I want to invest so that can you help you to get your mind right. And so if we've invested in that before quarantine, it's a lot, we'll feel a lot better right now, knowing that our athletes are at home and they're equipped to deal with what's going on.
You know, I have some athletes that have come to me and said, you know, I really hate getting in the weight room, but I know the reason why. And so that's why I do it. So even the guy that had the toughest time getting in the weight room, even when everything's going in a team setting, are finding ways to make sure they get the work in and are following up with us, right? Or you know the guy who's calling you saying, hey, what's this and this? You know that he's doing the program. It's the guy who's not calling. It's like, hey, you gotta call and say, what you been doing? You know, but even the ones that aren't the most motivated to get in are still doing so because they know the purpose behind the exercises. They know the process that works for them is gonna, you know, and that ultimately it's gonna pay off. It doesn't have to be, you know, every single day. It's not going to return to a routine that they would be in the team setting. However, you know, and it's a little bit more leeway regarding times, especially if it's an individualized workout. So that's fine, but they are making sure that 2-3 times a week that they're getting their work in that fits them the most, right?
A guy that you and I both had a chance to be around and coach, who's a pitcher for the Washington Nationals,
Yes.
Max Scherzer, told me a few weeks ago that he has a friend who's a catcher. His friend who's a catcher for the Detroit Tigers moved his family in with Max's family, and they wake up and throw and catch every day. And then they train, they lift, and then he said, and then we're dads in the evening, living under the same roof. Now, that's internally, intrinsically motivated to be the best. Like we're gonna shape our whole lives around what does it take to be ready. So I don't think so you have someone like him who may come in to camp pretty close to being ready. Then you have some that weren't that innovative, weren't that creative. And so what are they doing? How are they pitching and hitting and catching? And when you bring all of those athletes back and you have the whole range of those who are ready and not so ready, we've got to figure out how we're going to get everybody ready without breaking the Max Scherzer, because he's close to being game shape, and the person that just wasn't creative or motivated to be ready. We've got a huge task in front of us. And what do you have, Ted? I see you smiling.
No, what I did is I went back and looked at, you know, when I first started into this business in the late 70s, early 80s, and I was at Ohio State, our players didn't report till August 1st. So I went back and looked at the football injury research from the late 70s, early 80s compared to the last 10 years. And back then, there was no 20-hour rule, and it was 2-a-days every day for 3 weeks. So I looked at the injury rates, and really, you didn't see that many more injuries in the late 70s and 80s. And then I also I compared over the last 10 years, the injury rates between Division I football and Division III football. Because Division III football, they report August 1st and you get ready for week 1. And you don't see that much of a difference. Now, I'm not saying there's not going to be a spike in injuries this year, but if you look back at models where players didn't report till, say, 5-6 weeks before the first game, there wasn't that dramatic of an increase in injuries compared to what's happened the last 10 years. So you hope that is the case, but it's certainly going to be interesting to see what happens.
We know something that is different from back then, and that's social media and the way and media. So we'll see how that has an impact as well. Be interesting. It will be.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, gentlemen, I think we're pretty close to wrapping this up. What else is there anything else we can hit on before we wrap this show up?
I thought that was great. I mean, I think if we can, I don't know what happened to Chris, but
He had a meeting. He said he had a meeting.
Really? Okay.
He had to jump off. Yeah.
Yeah. No, if we wanted to bring on Daniel real quick, if he's still there, I'm not sure if he's still there. He's showing.
Can you guys see me or hear me?
Hey.
Yeah. We can hear you. There you go. You're back.
I'm back.
So we wanted to bring on Daniel as a special guest to end the show the right way, right? And bring on a tremendous leader.
Well, I'll tell you guys, I've been listening to the whole time, man. There's so many times I was ready to jump on in and participate, but I don't know if that was my role today or not. But I'd love to be a part another time in the roundtable discussion. It was really fun to listen in, and there's so many times I was ready to touch that button and say, I want to get in there, but
and that's,
you let me know when the right time is.
Unfortunately, it was, and we would have called you in. Unfortunately, your sound is just always like it's messed up. To be honest,
We've got to catch you when you're not on a run, out and about.
Yeah. Get you,
Yeah.
When
I got you. Sorry about that, guys.
on Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
In a quiet place, but we can obviously set that up. But
man, I can go next week, man, or whenever next time you guys do it, man. I'll just be at home.
yeah, and
Appreciate it.
Daniel, just wanted to. I know, obviously our purpose is to spread an educational, healthy word at this time.
Yeah.
And I think we made an adjustment from an association standpoint through the NBA. We made our adjustment. And that's what we would typically provide in the combine as a live event. We switched it to a virtual event. So you as president of the association, the National Basketball Strength and Conditioning Association, I know that this is something that you've been working hard on and just wanted to hear a little bit more about it.
Yeah, it is. Thanks for saying, the whole purpose of us even joining started as an association back in 07, 08. Was for a lot of the same, the 3 C's that Dr. Ivy talked about, a way to collaborate, a way to communicate, and a way to talk about how we provide the best care to our athletes using the most up-to-date scientific research and collaborating all the different experiences all together. And the really unique thing is about each year at the Combine, we have an opportunity the one time a year, all the strength and conditioning coaches, trainers, PTs, directors, GMs, players, everybody's all at the same place at the same time. And we started back probably about 7, 8 years ago now, or even maybe longer, started doing we do a symposium, conference to get everybody together. We invite people from all over the country to speak in different areas. And this year, obviously, because of the situation we're in, we decided to make it a webinar and to go virtual. So what we're doing, and we partnered with the NSCA, and we're going to have a seminar. It's going to be Saturday, May 23rd. We start at 8 a.m. We have a lot of great speakers. We got speakers from different strength coaches with different backgrounds, which is really exciting. I can tell you guys all about the speakers, but if we can save that for another time. There it is. There it is. We have, as you know, we have a keynote speaker. Pat will be speaking. Garrity from the Detroit Pistons. And right there, the feature NBA experts, you guys can see it right there all for yourselves. But Dr. Michael Tudor, Coach Schlesinger with the Suns, a lot of great college experience there. Coach Kenyon with the Blazers, Barr over at New York, and Coach Paul at the Thunder. So, and then we got Lee coming in as well. And we have some other great panels. So it's going to be a really fun event. And this is the first, and the way we're kind of learning now is we didn't have to wait for a pandemic to start doing more online virtual continuing education opportunities. And I think this will be one of the more in the future that won't be just based around the combine in May. So more than anything, it's an opportunity to hear from other professionals, and we'll have a roundtable, some discussions, and some breakout sessions. So it should be a fun experience. Javar put a lot of work into this as well, organizing it, and he did a big thing last year. He kind of changed the format where it was more interactive, and it was the feedback was great on it. So I'm really looking forward to around year 2 this year, and hopefully try to get this another time, not just every year in May. So that's what we got going on.
That's awesome. I looked at some names on there that was on our staff. Andrew Paul and Tadora Pandolf were.
Yeah.
We may have been all on the same staff at the same time at one point.
Oh wow,
that's pretty cool. So
very cool.
I can't wait to tune in.
We could have a conference with just everyone that has worked with and under Pat Ivy. I mean, that would be a tremendous educational experience in itself. That is for sure.
Oh man, come on.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all, and I definitely want to give a shout out to Sornex for helping us out. I know they've been helping me out. They're a sponsor, so thank you guys. It's been great. This is our first one first of many. We'll continue to fine tune it and look for your feedback as well. So please, if you all have any comments or questions or just how to continue to make this even better, love for you to just drop a note. You can leave it on my website at pativy.com or beyondsetsandreps.com, whatever it may be, and appreciate you guys. So before we leave, why don't you all just tell our listeners where they can find you? What's the best place?
So, I mean, Instagram, at Javar Gillette. Make sure it's not Javier, please. It's spelled Jav as in Victor, AIR, Gillette, without the E at the end. No relation to the razor. So at Javar Gillette. I think that's the best place. Direct message me through that. And you can also find me on LinkedIn. And I check that and respond to people all the time on there too. So open book. Would love to hear and talk shop with all you guys.
Very good. Similar to Javar, I'm on Instagram at King Shapiro 21, or as well as LinkedIn. And yeah, I'm pretty open. If anybody even want to email, I'm dshapiro@clippers.com, DSHAPIRO@clippers.com.
You can find me. I'm on LinkedIn, and my email is t_Lambrinides@yahoo.com.
All right. Thank you all. Appreciate you all joining us. I think this has been pretty good. So we'll go ahead and wrap it up.
Thanks,
Take care.
Take care.